Alright guys, I just wanted to go over how I go about assembling figures and kind of some techniques that I've done with customizing. This is actually a Shea Vizsla kit that I'm going to be putting together using a Jin Urso. For example, as you can see here, Jin Urso's base figure is pretty close to what has been enlarged. So I think this actually would work really well. Now, there's a lot of different methods out there that you can articulate figures with. I have mentioned in previous posts to buy different joints such as the BJ05, TN13. A lot of these joints actually get used on model kits. I believe I've seen them done on Gundam models, but I mean, you can use them on just about any figure. Stealing joints from other figures, I've found that that's probably the best method to work with. So how I would start this is, as you can see, we've got Jin Urso, we kind of figured out, all the joints that are in there. We know, how it's articulated. And the way I would actually put this or combine this with this figure is I would cut about halfway, because we know that there's going to be like a peg in here holding that joint in. So I would recommend cutting it about halfway, and then what you're going to do is Dremel down a nub on this end, and then with this piece you're going to Dremel a hole that'll fit that nub down in there. You're just going to slide that in and glue and epoxy it in, and then add a little bit of sculpt to make it a little more seamless. So the next steps are basically Dremeling that down a little bit, making a nub so that it slides up into this piece here. Alright, so now I've got the nub all cut down. You might have to actually shave down the sides because it does get a little thick. So right there on each side, you want it to be kind of thin, and you don't want that joint to be exposed, because when you put glue in there, and if you've cut too far, it's going to seize up your joint so that it won't move. So once you get that all spliced up and stuff, then you're going to Dremel that forearm armor piece out, and it's just going to slide right on. You're going to push it all the way on, and you'll notice that I've actually notched out where that joint is. That way, when you move it up and down, we don't run into any issues with the articulation. And next, what we're going to do is take this shoulder piece. The thing we need is just this nub on this end. So we can pretty much cut down most of this bicep. We can get rid of most of this and just basically use this shoulder and then this piece as a nub to slide up inside this end. So I'll go ahead and do that. Okay, so I Dremeled out the joint, and basically this side right here, I'll show you what that looks like. So that was the other side of where that joint was. You'll notice that I've kind of Dremeled it all the way down to the joint itself, and then just kind of sand it down to fit within the next piece. So I've Dremeled a hole down in this piece, which will slide onto this piece. And I'll just go ahead and slide that on, show you what that looks like. So now we have the shoulder, the forearm, and we have this joint. So I have now Dremeled down the shoulder, and you just want to make that into more of a ball joint than anything. That's kind of what we're doing. You'll notice that this piece, as I mentioned before, I've created basically a hole for the shoulder to slide into. Fits right on top. And you can glue that in, epoxy it, however you want. Just try not to get it down in the joint, otherwise you're going to end up with a stuck joint. So once you get that on, you want to leave a little bit of room, because obviously what we're going to do is we've still got the torso to attach. So leave enough space so that it can actually move, but this is gives you an idea of what that's going to look like. We've got the torso, and what I plan to do with this is I'm going to splice right down the middle of this and create a nub on each side, and then what I'll do is I'll Dremel this out and stick it in there, similar to what we've done with the other parts. All right, I've got this Dremeled out. As you can see, I went ahead and trimmed down each piece. So as you can see, you know, you don't have to go wild or completely destroy this. The idea behind it is to just get the female end around that part. So it should actually fit in there quite nicely. So now we have kind of an insert that can be plugged in, and I can do that with the other one. So as you can see, then this piece, this arm, will connect right on top of this, and then this just plugs in just like that. We've got this all assembled. The next thing that we need to work on is the pelvic area. This can be really tricky, especially with a full cast like this. I'm thinking what I'll do is cut right where this line is, all the way across, and then as you see here on Jen, I've cut off her midsection, and I am going to glue that on, attach it to the pelvic. We'll add some sculpt, get that fitting nicely. And then for this piece, what I've done is I Dremeled off the back. We'll put on with this and sculpt all this together. We'll sculpt the back, and then we will add this little container piece and glue it on. Dremeled out a hole on the top, and then I extracted the joint, the ball joint that was actually in a Farm Boy Luke. I pulled that entire thing out, Dremeled down the piece that holds the ball, as you can see. That way I can actually just slide this in, push it down, and have a ball joint for the waist. So then the next thing that I'll do is I will Dremel a hole and insert that peg here. It'll just go right up inside, and then it'll be articulated. So this is what it looks like with the hole Dremeled into the torso. Try to get it as center as possible, and then, as I mentioned before, I've actually inserted this in, and this just goes inside the torso. So just flip that around, push on it, and we have an articulated torso now. And now that we've got it Dremeled out pretty thin, I can actually just glue this in place and then fill in any gaps or spaces with some epoxy and kind of sculpt out those areas. So pretty straightforward. For the most part, this does wrap now that we've got it thinned out enough. So I have Dremeled out the thighs. So I measured about the size of where that joint was going to be, and then cut it off at that point. You cut these two pieces off, Dremel them out so that they're nice and thin on the inside, and then with this piece I've cut it off about halfway from the knee to where that joint is. Just chop it off, and then what you can do is just kind of Dremel this down a little bit, just so it's thinner. And then what you're going to do is take these pieces and slice them. See that I've Dremeled right where that line is, that swivel line is. And then this has been dremeled out fairly thin. I didn't go all the way through yet, but it has been dremeled out on the top. And this actually will just fit right on top. I ended up using a 3.75 inch figures knees because I thought they fit better than actually trying to find a 6-inch figure. The legs, basically I just dremeled those down, plugged them in, and then these are the Black Series Leia feet, which are also just plugged into that armor. The backpack, actually, I decided to make it plug in. So it's when I created this part, I decided to leave the plug with the cast, and then I just dremeled a hole in the back, which the peg from the existing figure was already there. So I went ahead and just dremeled that out, and this actually just plugs right. Plug it in here. So you just push that in. Alright, so for these two little armor pieces, what I did was I went ahead and just cut them out from the shin, and I am going to attach them, glue them on right up above to the knee. Alright, so I got those pieces on. I got the wire installed to the backpack. Everything is all articulated. So next up, what we would do is basically clean up some of these seams. I use Abe's epoxy, and we'll go through and basically fill in, sculpt some of the areas. The pelvic area has some armor that's missing. I'll sculpt that in. The legs, what we'll do is we'll fill in some of those gaps, and then we'll actually sculpt in some of the armor details. Joints, we'll clean those up a little bit with some sculpt. The shoulder joints we'll clean up. And then any imperfections on the cast that may have not quite come through, we'll go in and clean up and add some sculpt. The shoes will go in and add some sculpt to those. And then once we get everything all sculpted on and cleaned up, then we'll go in and prime this figure.